Din, 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 din. You have to remember the first rule of exploring. Never say you'll be right back, because you will never be right back. Have you not watched Scream? Have you not watched Scream? I guess you wouldn't have. Hello interwebs, I'm here to review the latest episode of the Book of Boba Fett, this time Chapter 18, or the second episode of Season 3, called The Mines of Mandalore. And I'm going full spoilers on this one, but before we get into it, I kind of want to talk a little bit about some of the reaction that I saw down in the comments on last week's premiere episode from all of you. And I actually have to say, I saw a lot of negative comments and people saying they didn't like the premiere episode of the season. And I have to say, I kind of understand, because watching this episode, and even last episode, I kind of spoke about it in my review last episode, it's like I've kind of had to retrain my brain a little bit because I'm kind of riding high going into this season of The Mandalorian, basically off of my love of Pedro Pascal right now, just the veneration of him, and then also just the excitement that I've had watching Star Wars Andor, because that show is so great, and actually also the Bad Batch. If you haven't been watching the Bad Batch, I've actually really been enjoying that. I know more people are mixed on it because of a lot of the filler stuff, but to be honest with you, the filler stuff has been sort of well balanced in my mind with the like larger story arc stuff that actually has the same sort of like fuck fascism vibe as Andor in that show. So I've kind of actually liked the balance, and that's kind of a nice little like fun / fuck fascism balance going on in that show for me. So going into Mandalorian last episode, I was much more high just going into it off the vibes than a lot of other people were. And I stand by my review. But coming into this episode, I am also sort of like feeling that feeling a little bit of like, you know, this is just the fun Star Wars show that I just have to understand. Like, there's not gonna be some grander message. It's just gonna be like fun Star Wars shit, and that's okay. I think that that's fun, and I certainly understand people having a little bit lower, like being down on the episode, and I'm not saying that there weren't legitimate criticisms. There most certainly was, like people saying that, you know, going back to, you know, get the IG droid sort of negated Taika Waititi's, the IG droids sacrifice at the end of season 1, totally makes sense. Then there was a bunch of other ones too. For me, I'm just sort of like, I'm putting this on like a completely different scale than I am on Andor, and maybe that's, you know, fair, maybe it's not fair. I'm just sort of like, did I have fun with it? Did I enjoy my time, you know, being here in the Star Wars universe doing Star Wars nonsense, and it wasn't like absolute crap and also overrun with nostalgia bait like season 2 of Boba Fett, which was my biggest problem with that season? Then I'm going to generally be okay with it. And you know, that's just where I'm sitting at in my reviews of this season right now. And, you know, maybe I could be harsher on it, and I'm certainly harsher on other things, and maybe, again, fair or not fair, but that's where I'm sitting at it. And going into this episode, with that being said, I'm kind of still at that point. I had fun with this episode. I have a lot of nitpicks, but some of them are like nitpicks that I have with Star Wars generally. Whereas, you know, beyond that, I do have a couple small things here and there, but I had a lot of fun with this one. And there was also just some cool, like, fan servicey moments for Star Wars fans here, but in a way that didn't feel like Mandalorian Season 2, where it was like, here's your Luke Skywalkers, here's this reference. It felt more pertinent or, you know, tied to the story going on, but still was like, ooh, I kind of wanted to see that in live action Star Wars, and now I get to, and that was cool, namely us going to Mandalore. I will say, let's start off at the beginning of this. We start back on Tatooine, and it's sort of like the celebration day. We get a couple little pod race references. It wasn't overly gratuitous for me. It was just a fun little, like, gimmicky fun moment with our favorite, like, technician lady that's been in the past few seasons. I forget her name. She's always fun and a good time. The one thing I will say, and this is one of my bigger criticisms of the episode, is she manages to sell Din a astromech droid, which this I did not like, because it's like, we built up that Din has no trust of droids whatsoever, right? And, you know, I can buy, as we saw last episode, like, look, I will trust a droid, the one droid that has earned my trust. But then you get to this episode and he's like, oh, now he'll just have an astromech droid. And I'm sort of like, that seems to undercut everything you've been doing with his character. And I know that it's not, it is pertinent, because you built up like he's only doing this to trust the IG droid. And it's like, where are we going with that storyline? And it feels like it's sort of going nowhere, and you're kind of undercutting his character development by just sort of willy-nilly giving him an astromech droid. So that was my big thing with the episode. I'm like, I hated that choice. I disliked it. And I would have preferred not to. That being said, I did like, once we got out of there, and we go to Mandalore, and we get to see like him teaching Din teaching Grogu how to like look at maps, like a little dad. He's just dad and he's like teaching him all stuff. I really enjoyed that and sort of passing on knowledge. And then we get to Mandalore itself, and it was great to see that. I have to say I've never loved the volume, which is sort of like the big wall that they use to create big spaces in Star Wars, and also Star Trek Discovery and a couple other Star Trek shows have done that. And my big problem with it is that they sort of like feel like cavernous and empty like spaces, and that works a little bit for Tatooine considering it's a desert, and it actually works great here because it really sells the desolation of Mandalore. So in a couple specific cases, and especially here, I thought it worked really well and to great effect, because seeing the underground destroyed city of Mandalore, the like desolation of the planet's surface of Mandalore was really cool, and I think sold it very well for me. And then we get, and this is another thing I dislike, but it's a thing that I dislike about Star Wars generally, and not specifically this show. And Andor, actually, is the only show that did this well for me, because, you know, my boy B2 Emo was treated well and respected as a person, damn it, in that show. But here in this, we have Din treating that poor astromech droid like crap. It's like, ah, yeah, go do my business. Oh, this is droid work. And I'm like, excuse me, droid work? That's a choice that the writers made to say in the show. So I'm not a fan of that, but I have to kind of a little bit put that aside, because that is a Star Wars problem in general that I think like some of the animated shows like Bad Batch and B2 Emo in Andor are the only ones that have really done well by the droids, in my opinion. But yeah, so I'll let that go a little bit. But then Din goes in, and we sort of get the like fight with these Morlock-looking creatures, and we get to see the big city, and then they go into the deeper bowels of the Mandalore and just getting to see how destroyed it is. I thought that was great. And then we get this like weird like spindly leg creature thing that captures Din. I loved this. The visuals on this and the design of it were so cool. It reminded me a lot of Darth Maul, and when we first meet him back in the Clone Wars animated series, where he has all the spidery legs at that point and has gone kind of mad. I thought was just really cool. I loved all of this design. Thought it was great. Really no notes, to be honest with you. And then we get another thing where I have a Star Wars nitpick. And again, problem with Star Wars in general, not the show, but I like that Grogu sort of had to like defend himself and take care of himself, but I like that Grogu couldn't save Din. It would have been, I think it's like, I like the fact that Grogu has to take care of himself, but he can't actually do the saving of Din by himself. Like, he still needs help from someone else. He's not fully formed, and I like that being an arc for Grogu, that he's not fully able to do it by himself. So I did enjoy that bit, but here's my nitpick with Star Wars. The fact that Grogu can get away, like travel like miles underneath this like Mandalorian city thing, get to a ship, go to a whole different planet, pick up a Bo-Katan, and fly all the way back and get back down there in what is probably like 30 minutes. And again, that's kind of a Star Wars problem. You can get anywhere in the freaking Star Wars galaxy in like 2 seconds. We established in multiple different Star Wars properties. So I have to let that go. This isn't Star Trek, where it takes a lot of time to get from one place to another, and even Star Trek sort of fudges that a lot too. But it's just sort of like, wow, that's a long way to go. To get help in like the short amount of time you need it. But regardless, I did like that we got Bo-Katan coming to save Din. And I kind of had a curiosity. I wish maybe it was verbalized or shown a little bit, but we kind of get it hinted at in the visuals. I wonder if her desire to go save Din is like, she likes Din well enough, and maybe she feels like she owes him, but she's sort of annoyed at him. Maybe some of the desire to go and save him was a little bit self-serving, because she wants the Darksaber. Even though she says she doesn't, she kind of still does. We get hints of that by the fact that she used the Darksaber to rescue Din, and that looked badass. Say what you will about the show, but the visuals of it looked awesome. Like, the action was great. Really enjoyed that. You know, the dopamine hits sometimes. I enjoyed the fun little action beats. But then after the rescue sequence, which was a lot of fun, I don't love blood, like, stealing. That stuff always creeps me out. But then we get a couple bonding moments between Bo and Din, where they sort of bond over their kind of like shared history on Mandalore, and you get to see like the little bit of like difference in perspective with Din and Bo. I really like that she's still she has a lot of reference for Mandalore, but she doesn't hold a lot of reference for like Din's sort of weird cult viewpoint, or at least she views it as a cult. But he sort of has this reference for the Mandalorian world. And I like that, and I like the moment where they finally get to the waters, where he has to bathe, and he sort of it's a big moment for him, even though she's sort of like, whatever, it's the thing. Here's the history, there's a beast or whatever. And I thought that was cool. I will say it was a little bit dumb that Din just sort of like falls and goes all that way, and then she has to rescue him. I'm like, dear God, Din, you can't do anything for yourself here. So it was that I will chalk up to being a little bit dumb. It's like, that's really kind of a stupid thing to have done. But I did like the visuals again of her rescuing him and seeing that beast. I was like, oh, that's cool. I love underwater beasts. Like, I love big, scary things underwater. Not in real life, but in fiction, I think it's cool. And I always kind of get like, oh, God, that's just like, oh, I get scared of like anglerfish and giant things. It's always creepy. Jacob Geller, actually, if you know, like him as a YouTuber, did a great video on that sort of fear. So that was visually cool, though I did think it was a little bit dumb of how she got there. But yeah, it was an interesting way to end out the episode. So having talked out my review of this, I have to say, like, if I'm sitting here with the logic of this, there are a couple things that I dislike, like the astromech droid, like Din falling underneath the water, and then there's a couple things that I'm like, I have Star Wars nitpicks, but they're generalized Star Wars nitpicks here and there. But at the end of the day, I had fun. And, am I going to sit here and be like, I'm really excited, am I mentally stimulated by the show? It is not Andor. If I had to compare this to Andor, I'd be like, this show sucks. But on a certain visceral, like, I'm just sitting back, enjoying myself, turning off my brain a little bit, and enjoying some fun times with some characters. I'm enjoying it. I wish I had more meat to dig into with the show? Like, I'm not writing a big video essay about the politics of Mandalorian, at least not on the level of, like, how in-depth it went with Andor. But, I had fun with it. But that's sort of where I'm sitting at. I'm enjoying the show so far. It's not getting into weird, like fan servicey nonsense that I thought was overboard with season 2. And it seems to be developing just a fun little story, even though it has some dumb moments here and there. So I'm liking it. I'd love to hear your thoughts, though. Let me know down below what you think of this episode of The Mandalorian, and I'd love to hear you all. Don't know where I was leading to there. I hope you all live long and prosper, my friends. Mwah.